Hello. Um, is Lebanon, as we came to know it in the 20th century, finally coming to an end? Is it in decline? Is what's going on today a hiccup, a rough patch, or is it a dismantlement? Um, to the disappointment of many, to my own disappointment, I would say that Lebanon is being dismantled if it has not already ended. This is not to be alarmist. It's not to be mean. It's not to voice an opinion. Just observing and describing a reality. I think that Lebanon, as we came to know it in the last 100 years, is, for all intents and purposes, kaput. There are, of course, geniuses out there who might argue that it's not washed up, that it is simply evolving, it's changing, it's transforming, it's mutating. Some argue it's growing, it's becoming better than it's ever been before, blah, blah, blah. Um, Once these sort of insufferable platitudes are gotten out of the way, we can probably get to the serious business of contemplating this looming end, the dismantlement of Lebanon and Lebanese identity, and perhaps do something about it to prevent the downfall, to prevent the disappearance. Lebanon, by the way, is not unique in this case. It is indeed symptomatic of other civilizations being dismantled. It is part and parcel, or if not dismantled, being other civilizations being assaulted, if you will. So this is, part of a general decline, if you will, of Western civilization, of Judeo-Christian civilization, of which Lebanon is a founding element, I dare say, not only a part. Um, and it, it, this is also concomitant to to another kindred culture of Lebanon's, and that is the decline of French civilization. Uh, if we consider the longue durée, the temps long of Lebanese history, there is no doubt, if you look at it, in its millennial sort of continuity, um, there's no doubt that Lebanon had at one time a colossally important presence in the world and in world history on the international stage. And I'm not talking here about modern Lebanon's now failed mission and ambition as a bridge between East and West and all that jazz, the hyphen between Islam and Christendom and the dialogue of cultures. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about truly edifying moments, events, figures in Lebanese history. Not on the history of Lebanon, but in Lebanese history. I'm talking about the invention of the alphabet. I'm talking about the invention of navigation. I'm talking about the invention of trade, the barter system, great women and men in Lebanese history that changed the course of human history. I'm talking about Europa. I'm talking about Elissa. Um, I'm talking about Qadmus, Hannibal. I'm talking about Fakhreddin, Gibran, Charles Corm, Patriarch Hwayik. I'm talking about these events, these personalities, these impactful moments in people's in Lebanese history. Imagine that there was a period during the 16th century when Europeans, in order to depict a learned man, an erudite, used the phrase savant comme un maronite. a learned person like a Maronite. Imagine that. This was not too long ago. But when a country loses this capacity to produce, to instigate phrases like this, d'avant comme un maronite, when it loses its capacity to produce historical and intellectual figures of the caliber of those intellectual and cultural and political figures that I mentioned earlier, when it loses its capacity to affect historical events on that scale, when it exchanges let's say, it's Napoleon's and Charles de Gaulle and Victor Hugo, when it exchanges them with thugs like illiterate thugs like Hassan Nasrallah and deranged megalomaniacs like Michel Aoun, and adulates them like some divinity or some gift to humanity, one may very well deduce from that impulse that the country and the people in question are in a state of decline, perhaps even on the road to extinction. Even as a state, for all intents and purposes, as in state institutions, if you will, Lebanon has ceased to exist. Why? Because the primary role of a state is to ensure the protection of its citizens. Therefore, when the state shirks that role, or when the state becomes incapacitated fulfilling that duty, that state will have, for all intents and purposes, ceased to exist. Note that when I speak about the protection of the citizenry by state, I'm not talking exclusively or strictly about physical protection here, even though that too is degraded in Lebanon. The state is no longer able or willing to protect its citizenry. But the protection that I'm talking about here is the protection of interests, protection of cultural attributes, cultural specificities of the state, freedom to learn and teach one's own cultural rituals and languages and histories, the protection of the country's social fabric. Likewise, when the state labors to render its citizens strangers in their own land, by adopting the ways of a colonial power, or killing the populace demographically, the state will also have abdicated its reason for being, its raison d'être. When you become a minority in your own national state, your state has ceased to exist. When your state abandons its historic foundations, its substrats, if you will, its founding communities, when it abandons its cultural accretions, this equates to the state initially your protector, a protector of your values, of your historical references. This equates to the state when it abandons these. The state is essentially seeking your erasure, and the state will have therefore ceased to exist. This, unfortunately, is not only irreversible, it has a certain finality to it. It has an immutable certainty. The Lebanese today are, for all intents and purposes, are being replaced. They're being replaced demographically, culturally, socially, ethnically, and they. What is scary in this exercise is that they remain mere spectators in this theater of their replacement, adopting and getting adapted to their own replacement, being resigned to it, if you will. Historical distortions and normalizations of falsehoods in one way or another is a way by which the Lebanese are adapting their own erasure and getting resigned to it. The normalization of falsehoods is indeed the most salient symbol of Lebanon's disappearance and the abdication of its state institutions and citizenry today. This normalization of falsehoods is indeed one of the most effective tools of totalitarianism. If we are to read Hannah Arendt's The Origins of Totalitarianism, it's these sorts of normalization, acceptance of falsehoods forces us to not see what we're actually seeing, what not or dismiss as false what is actually happening, and to call what we actually see something other than what it actually is. In other words, submitting to a falsehood, accepting as truth a falsehood when we actually know that it is a falsehood. This is truly remarkable. It is a process by which, for instance, we call a satanic thug like Hassan Nasrallah, we call him a Sayyid, or it's the process by which we call a sociopath like Michel Aoun, Al-Ahd al-Awi, or Jabal Samnin, and insufferable garbage like that. This is literally 1984. It's a universe of inverted realities, and when a people is prevented from countering these phenomena for a variety of reasons, ranging from fear of retribution to fear of being tarred traitors or Islamophobes or collaborators or Zionists, that people enters into a logic of extinction. And it is my firm belief that the Lebanese have already entered that logic, unfortunately.